Okay, it's Thursday, September 8th. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's just get started. Uh, Anthony Blinken was unexpectedly in Kyiv. This was an unannounced visit. President Joe Biden's administration is putting another 2 billion toward Ukraine and other European countries. Now, this is not just to Ukraine. This is about 1 billion of that is going to Ukraine, and the rest is going to be divided among the regional security partners, and even RT is acknowledging that. Zelensky calls Blinken's visit a real solidifying thing. Now remember, he just had the transition from to Liz Truss from Boris Johnson, and so it's comforting to have extra support. He said the visit of your team is an important signal for us, confirmation of the leadership support that exists today. These are very important signals that the United States is with us. For us, this is a guarantee that we can return to our territories. Remember, he's determined to get there. He knows he can only do this with partners, and so he's very sensitive to that sort of thing. Okay, here's Pravda. Pravda is talking about how Ukraine shells and bombs regions that want to join Russia. Well, okay, Ukraine is shelling in occupied territory, but whether they want to join Russia or not is an open question. If they wanted to join Russia, it would be a very different thing if they just had a simple vote, but to occupy the territory and then have the vote is a kind of a different experience. Headquarters of the We Are Together with Russia movement was exploded in the city of Melitopol. And no one was hurt in the explosion, and there's a second explosion, and that presented the scenario of, explosion creating casualties and then people coming in and getting more exploded or whatever. So this is how Pravda carried the article. Um, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty was a little bit had a little bit more to it. The explosion, the first article I just showed you was Pravda, and I try to show these back to back because you can get different nuances from things. An explosion rocked the headquarters of the pro-Russian movement. Russia occupied Ukraine's city of Melitopol. We knew that, right? Ukraine media report says that We Are Together with Russia movement is actively involved in the preparation of so-called referendums on the occupied Ukrainian territories becoming part of Russia. It's not just a political party. They're actually moving toward sham elections, trying to get, enough people with Russian passports and that kind of thing. Then it goes on and gives some of the backstory. And we talked about this one yesterday or the day before, where an official was killed yesterday, but several officials appointed by Moscow to areas of Ukraine during the Kremlin's invasion of the country have died in recent weeks after being attacked last week. And so there was one just a day or two ago. But last week, a former Ukrainian lawmaker who joined the Russian imposed government was found dead. The days before that, the Moscow appointed mayor of the town of, I can't pronounce that name. I'm an American. I'm sorry. Zaporizhia. Even Shuko was killed by a car bomb, and there is another incident a week before, or a couple weeks before that, another before that. And when they first started happening, I remember the first car bomb incident, and I was thinking like, yeah, this isn't going to end well, and it's not going to end well because occupied people don't tend to take this line down, and so you'll see this underground movement develop, and you need about a 40-to-1 ratio, like one occupying soldier for every 40, let alone outside troops coming in trying to destroy it. Like if you're just occupying a country, let's say they took all of the territory that they were going to take, you'd need one Russian soldier for every 40 Ukrainians just to occupy the country. They doing the current math, looking at just the area that they're trying to occupy, it's like 1 to 290. It's not going to work well. It can't work. Even if Russia has a sham referendum and tries to say, "See, we're what," it's never going to work unless they fully mobilize, which I hope they don't do. But that's the only way that they'll have enough soldiers to be able to occupy, let alone fend off Ukraine trying to take the country back. So this is like it okay, so I'm about to say something in another article, and here's why. Just remember, I'm going to say here's why. It's because you just can't hold the territory. Okay. Ukraine counterattack takes Russia and everyone else by surprise. Sudden, unexpected military success in southeast of Kharkiv changes. Now, Kharkiv is in the north, right? Kherson is the offensive in the south. Kharkiv's in the north. It changes the analysis of Kiev's counterattack strategy. A well-telegraphed effort to isolate the city of Kherson in the south has been turned on its head by the sudden pushback against Russian forces on the north edge. So, okay, we're going to have a counteroffensive down here, and then we attack up here, and and that's essentially what happened. Um, the military aim is to increase pressure on Izium, a strategic city captured by the invaders at the end of April, a gateway to the western Donbas. Okay, so here is the area that they're counterattacking in the yellow. Izium is here, and I remember when that was taken, and I'm like, oh, that's bad, because it was like at a strategic crossroads. Okay, and so if they're trying to take all of this region here, like holding this and being able to press down into it, was really important. Okay, so and the counterattack is down here, the one that's telegraphed, and the southern counterattack is down this way. Okay, uh, so Kyiv strategy, they're willing to be flexible and opportunistic, and I think that's right. I I I called something somewhat like this, but I had it wrong. I said, well, while they're projecting and saying we're going to do that here, they're going to be able to push back here because of all the troops being relocated, and that's true. There were 20,000 troops relocated here into the northwest side of the river, and so that is true. But that's why they haven't taken more ground in the nets. But I got it wrong about where they were pushing back. They did it here. Now they have a 500-kilometer line here, right? This is the front line. It's 500 kilometers. So they can pretty much target wherever they think there's a weakness, and Russia has to go plug that hole. And so it's keeping Russia off balance. Okay, we have already lost. That's the line I was talking about when I was saying this earlier about like you simply can't hold it. Like even if you win, you're going to lose. Why? Okay, we've already lost. Far right bloggers slam military failures. Now these aren't just like wingnuts. Igor Girkin is a far-right nationalist, no, nationalist. Far-right is not left and right like the United States, like conservative and liberal. It's not. It doesn't work like that. But what it means is that he's a Russian nationalist, and the Russian nationalist thinks Ukraine should be absorbed into part of Russia. And Igor or Girkin was a commander hold on, a former Russian intelligence colonel who became commander of the pro-Russian separatist forces in 2014. So he was there on the ground in 2014. He knows what he's talking about here. And I've talked about him before because he came up a number of times as I've been videoing daily. Angry group of ultra nationalists and pro-war bloggers who have taken to berating the Kremlin for its failure to achieve tactical objectives. So they're pro-war. They're not saying this isn't a special operation. They're pro everything that they're doing, but they're saying, look, you can't make this kind of tactical error and that kind of tactical error. And the Kremlin's not saying like throwing them in jail. They're allowing it to vent this way. Um, on Wednesday, Ukraine launched a surprise counterattack near the biggest city of Kharkiv. The military bloggers are some are very dubious sources, but there are also some like Gherkin who know what they're talking about. The Russian Defense Ministry has repeatedly issued improbable statements about its successes on the battlefield, boasting of having destroyed more than 40 Western-made HIMARS. We didn't give Ukraine 40 HIMARS, so they're boasting about all these things that are destroyed, numbers that are higher than the actual number that were given. So, yeah. Rocket launchers claiming to have decimated the Ukrainian Air Force, saying a month in that they only had lost 1,300 some odd soldiers, when no, it was probably more like somewhere between 5 to 10,000 at that point. Probably closer to the 10,000 mark, or moving up toward that. It must be stated that Baklaina, the armed forces of Ukraine, have completely outplayed our command. This is Starsky Eddie, a popular pro-war Russian blogger. Wow, that the Russian military has been completely outplayed. Alexander Knotz, a pro-Kremlin war journalist, said we need to start doing something about the system where our leadership doesn't like to talk about bad news. That's right. Now, this rings very true to me. I'm a professor who teaches leadership, power and influence, um, servant leadership, management, all these kinds of leadership kind of courses. And this is exactly right. You need to start doing something about the system where our leadership doesn't like to talk about bad news. If you can't talk about bad news, you don't have truth, and that's going to be bad. This one, Andrei Morozov said, mobilization is, let's put it bluntly, our only chance to avoid a crushing defeat. And he's right. I hope the Russians don't fully mobilize, but the Russian narrative has been, oh, this will be easy. We just have this special operation. It's going to be right, and it was only supposed to take a few weeks. That's the only chance that Russia has is full mobilization, and the Russian mill bloggers know that. Now, the ISW, the Institute for the Study of War, confirmed exactly the same thing. Here, let me remove this or make this a little bit smaller. Ukrainian success in Kharkiv Izium line are creating fissures in the Russian information space, and they've gotten 500 kilometers deep. That is, they've penetrated 500 kilometers into Russian defensive lines. Mill bloggers. Some mill bloggers have noted that the Ukrainian forces have completely outplayed Russian command. Now, we just talked about that. Russian Ministry of Defense repeated its information mistake by failing to acknowledge the situation on the ground in Kharkiv Oblast. So they're just going, what? I mean, no, everything's fine. We're doing great. It's not working. The Russian Ministry of Defense struggles to address unexpected Ukrainian operations because its information strategy relies on portraying the Russian invasion of Ukraine as an easy, faultless operation. The Russian Ministry of Defense needs a significant amount of time to develop and spread false narratives in the Russian information space. And that's there. Remember, there's a hot war, there's a political war, there's a economic war, there's a propaganda war, and they're all played together. Okay. Mill bloggers will share and promote footage and imagery of fighting unfavorable to Russian forces that will just dominate coverage in the Russian information space if the Ministry of Defense does not provide its own media. And so they'll probably make up media and say, look, we destroyed this Heimer in the third story of this building. That's probably not where it's firing from. So that's what's going on there. Okay, let's talk about the Ukrainian general says how much gain. The question here is how much have they actually gained? A Ukrainian general says huge gains made in a lightning counteroffensive. Ukraine has recaptured more than 700 kilometers of its territory, and this was what? When was this? This was yeah. This was earlier in the day, I believe. The General Olensky Gromov told a news briefing that Ukrainians had advanced up to 50 kilometers or 30 miles behind Russian lines, and they've captured up to 700 kilometers. So now, in his nightly address, Zelensky said that they've taken more than 1,000, uh, and that is a significant amount. Okay, so let's turn to some other things. Zelensky also rang the NYSE bell, the New York Stock Exchange bell, and I'm continually impressed with Zelensky about how creative he is in drawing attention to Ukraine while he is arming the country, raising money for weapons and ammunition. So he's rung the bell. Zelensky's government launched a platform of over 500 projects worth $400 billion. Okay, so some people have done that while even as the war with Russia drags on. So it's like he's so visionary, so forward thinking to be doing this even now, and it's it, and these things are there's a confluence, right? He needs the weapons, but he also needs the money to come in for later. But the money coming in for later also draws in the weapons, and right, so one thing encourages the other. Okay, White House rejects branding Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. This is unfortunate. It would be a big break in U.S.-Russia relations permanently if they did it, but they are. I mean, the matter of fact is that they are a state sponsor of terrorism. White House says it would be counterproductive to brand Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, rejecting calls. Like the Senate went like 97-2 or something like that the other day. This was a couple weeks ago. The U.S. President Joe Biden asked earlier if he would blacklist Russia as a terror state, simply said no. Who else is a state sponsor of terrorism? It turns out it's Russia's friends, Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Cuba. Huh. Well, I mean, who your friends are is kind of who you are. Russian oil and gas reserves. This is Pravda, Pravda.ru. Russian oil and gas revenues grow by 50%, says the prime minister. Now, I don't know if the number's right, but I've seen other reports that says it has grown because they have shifted. They can't send it easily to Europe, but now they are shifting and sending it elsewhere in Asia. And how are they doing that? Asia, Africa, uh, um, Brazil is taking as much as they can, and a new major Russian economic forum wraps up with billions in deals. This is RT, but they're not lying here in RT. The economy is, they've made all kinds of deals, and Russia has had to shift gears because now it's connected to a different part of the world in a much more meaningful way than what it was before. It is no longer allowed to play in the European space, and so it's had to go elsewhere. Okay, last thing, usually I go to Twitter to look at the Ministry of Defense for the purposes of seeing what's going on in the war. Here, I just want to say to all my British friends, I am sorry for your loss. Queen Elizabeth was a class act, and I know that this is going to be a real time of mourning. I even feel some kind of weird loss, and she has no real meaning to me. But we're sorry for your loss. That's all that we have for today. Thank you for your time, and I'll be back tomorrow.